Chapter 49. A Sellsword's End. Pav Luther Strom. Gods, that knight has a loud voice. Julius Harlane. I'd only heard tales of him around the campfires. Seeing him now, I believed every word. Honor and blood. Are those his house's words? Nobody knows where he came from, and it doesn't matter now. The shaking in my hands was gone, replaced by the fire his words lit in us. We charged the enemy with all the ferocity we could muster. We were the first to hit. The killing started instantly on both sides. I drove my spear into an opponent's throat, killing him before he could blink. The spear was stuck fast, and I had no time to pull it free. I unsheathed my sword and shield just in time to block a blow from another man. It was a vicious struggle, but I somehow managed to get inside his guard. He was a well-trained knight in good steel plate, but he'd lost his helmet. I pulled my dagger and shoved it into his eye, piercing his skull. Then I killed a boy. A squire no older than 3 and 10. That isn't a kill a sellsword boasts of. The boy thrust his sword at me, maybe hoping for fame or to avenge his master. Before I even knew what I was doing, I cut off his head with a single slash. A boy, not even old enough to have felt a woman's cunt. Now all he'll ever feel is the embrace of the cold, muddy waters. I didn't feel a damn thing. No remorse, no sadness. This is war. Survival is the first and only thing that matters. We slowly pushed the loyalists back toward the river, but they just kept coming, throwing more men into the grinder. When I looked around, all I saw was men on both sides struggling, killing, and dying. The ground beneath us was a carpet of the dead. Very few men I personally knew were still standing, and they were dying one by one. For every man I killed, 2 more took his place. I didn't know how long we'd been fighting. Exhaustion was taking its toll, and I didn't know how long I could keep swinging my sword, the only thing left in my hand, my shield lost to the gods. Our morale was the only thing holding, and that was because of the man leading us. His blue cape was now a dark, sodden red. But the eagle-helmed knight was swinging his black sword like a circling windstorm. I don't know how many men he had killed. Just watching him for a moment, I saw 5 die. Each swing of his sword took a life. Gods, he was carving a bloody path through their lines. I have never in my life seen a beast that could butcher so many. The man wasn't human, he was a monster straight from the 7 hells. The more people who went near him, the more who ended up dead. And that was what gave us the strength to go on. Suddenly, our advance halted. Fresh loyalist forces slammed into us, and we saw the banner of the 3-headed dragon. With it came real knights in steel plate, not farmers with spears. They pushed us back toward the shore. Our side was not doing well. Most of the men who started with us were dead. The only clear thing was that we had killed more than twice our number. Even with our ranks dropping like flies, we held. For a moment, I thought this was the end. I couldn't have been more wrong. The next moment, Baratheon flags joined the fray, and at their helm, Lord Robert came blazing in on his horse. We got our momentum back. Then, in the midst of the battle, I saw a white blur and lost all my strength. Thus ended our bold sellsword. He fell into an eternal sleep with the rest of his fallen brothers. His name will be forgotten, just like the rest of the soldiers who fell on this field. There will be no song for him, though he deserved one. But it is their sacrifice that forges new history. The white blur he saw was none other than the Kingsguard, Esser Barristan Selmy. None could match his boldness. Valar Morghulis. Chapter 50. The Aftermath. Esser Claw Coldhand Pav. Why in the 7 hells am I doing this? I'm no messenger boy. I should be on the Trident, fighting the royalists beside Esser Julius. Sigh. Before the fight began, he ordered the 3 of us to stay out of it. Listen to me, he said. Don't be foolish. Your lives are more important to me than my own. I won't take that risk. A single mistake can get you killed, no matter how experienced you are. So, you will do as I say. I have a different task for you. You'll have your glory in other ways. We wanted to fight with him. To protect him with our lives if necessary. Though we knew he hardly needed it. The man is a Ownman army. But it still bothered us. Sigh. I was disappointed, but seeing how much he cared, it brought us to tears. He puts our lives before his own. I swear I will repay that love and care someday, with undying loyalty. Esser Julius gave each of us a different duty. Colt was given command of 2,000 knights from the Vale, mostly from House Waynwood, to protect the main rebel camp. It sounded simple, but Esser Julius was clear. If the battle was lost, Colt was to escort Lord Arryn to the Bloody Gate safely. He also had to be wary of the Frey army arriving late. So, Colt's job was to protect the camp and ensure a retreat if needed. Sir Julius gave Hale a different task. He and 100 veteran knights were to watch the west, eliminate any Lannister scouts, and monitor their army's movements. Hale is the best rider among us and a fine scout, so the mission suits him. But Sir Julius seriously warned him, if you see Gregor Clegane, do not engage at any cost. Even if you must sacrifice your own men. The words were dark, but we all knew he said them to protect Hale. Hale is clever, he can take care of himself. And lastly, my duty was to report the battlefield situation to Lord Arryn and the other lords in the main camp. A messenger boy. The most annoying job I could imagine. Sigh. Why me? But how could I refuse an order from the man I've devoted my life to? So I did my duty, watching the battle from a safe distance. The battle is over. We've won, of course. The royalist army is crushed, and I needed to report this to Lord Arryn. A few minutes later, I reached the main camp and entered the tent after a nod to the guards. Inside, Lord Arryn and Lord Tully were deep in discussion with other elderly lords. Lord Arryn saw me and immediately called for silence, signaling me forward. Sir Claw, he asked. What news do you bring? We have won, my lord, I replied. The royalist army is defeated. The tent fell silent for a full minute before erupting in overjoyed shouts. I was delighted too, as were my comrades. Watching these lords celebrate was a feast for the eyes. When they finally calmed down, Lord Arryn spoke again. Thank you, Sir Claw. But we would like the full report. Please explain in as much detail as you can. I cleared my throat. Yes, my lord. While we have won, it came at a great cost. Half of our foot soldiers died in the first clash. Most were from the first wave, led by Sir Julius Harlane. They were nearly wiped out, but they killed twice their number. I paused to see their expressions. Some looked sad, but most didn't seem to care about the common soldiers. The Vale cavalry on our left flank successfully defeated the Dornish forces. Our right flank held strong. The victory was sealed by Lord Robert himself, when he slew Prince Rhaegar Targaryen in a duel. However, Lord Robert was fatally injured. Sir Julius has taken charge of capturing as many loyalist soldiers, knights, and lords as possible. They looked satisfied. I added one last thing. Also, my scouts report that the Citadel and the Seps have sent hundreds of healers to aid the wounded. I am sorry, my lords, but this is all the information I have gathered so far. They didn't seem surprised by the last part. These organizations always help the wounded and stay neutral, though I feel they're supporting us more than the crown. Lord Arryn thanked me again, saying I'd done excellent work and the reports were enough for now. They were about to dismiss the meeting when Colt entered the tent. My lords, Colt reported. The banners of the Frey army have been sighted. We all saw Lord Hoster Tully curse them for being late. He even announced he would hang Lord Frey for it. Half an hour later, another person entered, Lord Hoster's son, Edmure Tully. What followed wasn't a happy reunion. I gave you one job. Lord Hoster scolded. To protect Riverrun and your sisters. Was it too much to handle? Why did you come here with the phrase? What if they took you hostage? Do you know what would have happened to your family? You have disappointed me for the last time. Now get out of my sight and return to Riverrun immediately. The young lord was heartbroken and left angrily. But a few minutes later, he returned. Father, Edmure said, apologizing. I came with the reinforcements from the twins, hoping they would be helpful. I rode ahead to inform you in advance. I am truly sorry I left my sisters at Riverrun alone. Lord Tully forgave his son and gave him some advice. Then young Lord Edmure shared news that made the two elderly lords overjoyed. His sister Lisa was 2 months pregnant. Me and Colt offered our congratulations, but I had other duties. I took my leave and rode back to the Trident to find Sir Julius. I needed to gather a full report on the casualties. Chapter 51. The Cost of Steel. Julius Harlane Pav. The battle is over. My body feels like it has been through the 7 hells and back. I am standing in a river of blood and flesh, and I am responsible for so much of it. The Trident ran red, its waters choked with the dead, floating like butchered fish. This was hell. A real, tangible hell. I have killed hundreds of men today. For what? A castle. Gold. A title. Influence. Power. I'm starting to question it all. What is the point of such prizes when they are paid for with human lives? Living, breathing people. Each soldier I cut down had a family. For some, he was the only one putting food on the table. Without him, a wife and children might starve. The men I killed, some had children waiting for their father's return. Others had parents waiting for a son, a wife for a husband. They will never come home because I sent them to the grave. These men weren't all evil. Most were just simple, unfortunate souls, drafted into a war of dragons and stags. With this much innocent blood on my hands, can I still call myself a good man? I believe I am. I have done good things for the people I've encountered. But does a good deed wash out the bad? Every joint in my body screams in protest. I need to rest. My body and soul demand at least 8 hours of sleep. Why am I thinking about the dead? I feel guilt for them. But they would have died in this battle anyway. Does it make a difference if they fell to my sword or another's? The result is the same. In a way, by fighting so fiercely, I ended the battle faster than it might have gone. Perhaps I saved more lives on our side by doing so. But saving some always means you can't save others. I tell myself I'm not killing for personal gain, but technically, I am. Castle, gold, position, it's all part of the reward. Whatever. In my years in Westeros, I have seen so much. The shitty politics the nobles play. The breathtaking landscapes, like 7 different continents patched into one. The impossibly beautiful, unrealistic medieval castles. The horrible, unique foods that somehow grow on you. Oh well. If I've survived this long, I can survive what's to come. Hopefully. It's time for rest. It's been a long day. I've done more than just fight a battle. And damn, the battle was awesome. I'm not a warmonger. I don't like needless killing. But I enjoyed the war, the fight itself. And that is, by its very nature, killing and bloodshed. I'm not a psychopath. It's just, my head is messed up with 2 different souls. I don't know what I am anymore. Overall, I have done more for this rebellion's war effort than almost anyone. I hope people remember that when all this is over. Robert may have defeated Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and won the glory with his hammer. But I defeated Barristan Selmy. The man is a living legend. Flashback. When our swords first clashed, he announced himself, his voice clear even over the din of battle. Sir Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard. State yours, Sir. I replied in my most dramatic tone, Sir Julius Harlane, a knight of this rebellion. The honor is mine, I suppose. And that was that. No more words, only the song of steel. I was exhausted from a day of slaughter, but I was still confident I could take him. That was my mistake. I underestimated his legendary skill and got stabbed for my arrogance. It wasn't a fatal wound, but it was the first time in a long time a blade had truly touched me. I must admit, Sir Barristan Selmy is a master swordsman. I am stronger, but he used my own strength against me, turning my power into his defense. But I have a higher tolerance for pain and a faster recovery. He couldn't keep up in the end. In the final moments, our swords locked. I was slowly overpowering him through brute force. Seeing him in that state, I'd had enough. I kicked him square in the chest, a crude, Spartan move. He landed hard several feet away, struggling to find his feet. It wasn't a knightly thing to do, I know. But this old lion needed to be put down. He had earned my respect in both of my lives. I walked toward him, seeing how heavily he was wounded. He looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw a man who had accepted his fate. I raised my sword for the final blow. But suddenly, I was distracted by a loud, roaring cry. Robert's voice boomed across the field for all to hear. Rhaegar. Chapter 52, The Fort of Fate rewritten. The roar that tore from Robert Baratheon's throat, Rhaegar, was a sound of pure, world-ending triumph. It echoed over the dying clamor of the battle, and in its wake, a strange silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the rush of the reddened river. I stood over Sir Barristan Selmy, my sword still raised. The great knight lay in the mud, defeated, his fate a single swing away. But my eyes were pulled to the scene in the water. Robert, standing victorious over Prince Rhaegar's body, was now buckling, clutching a grievous wound in his leg. The victory had come at a terrible cost. The decision was instant. I lowered my sword. Your war is over, Sir Barristan, I said, my voice rough from smoke and shouting. I gestured to the soldiers gathering around us, their faces a mix of awe and bloodlust. Take him. He is a prisoner of the rebellion. See that his wounds are tended. There was no honor in killing a legend who was already beaten. As they dragged the barely conscious Kingsguard away, I was already moving, shoving my way through the chaos toward Robert. The rebellion had just lost its figurehead and its future king in a single moment. Get him to the maesters. Now. I barked, taking charge as men stood stunned around their fallen leader. You, form a shield wall. The rest of you, with me. With Robert being carried from the field, a vacuum of command threatened to shatter our hard-won victory. The loyalist army was breaking, but a broken beast can still bite if not pursued. I saw the Valemen and Riverlords looking to the center, looking for direction. Their eyes turned to me. I was the one who had held the line. Reform the ranks. I shouted, my voice carrying across the ford. The day is ours, but the work is not done. Push forward. We moved with a grim, final purpose. The pursuit was brutal and efficient. We captured lords, knights, and common soldiers alike, shattering the last remnants of the Targaryen host. The Battle of the Trident was over. The rebellion had won. Later, as the sun began to set on the carnage, I found Lords Arryn and Tully. The formal command was theirs to take. As I relayed the situation, the soldiers nearby, men from the Vale, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, began to chant, their voices raw but united. They gave me a new name, forged in the fire of the ford, the Champion of the Trident. The title settled on my shoulders, as heavy as my armor. Finally, I retreated to my tent. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a deep, bone-gnawing exhaustion. My subordinates, Claw and Colt, helped me remove my battered, blood-soaked plate. A septa will come to see to your wound, Esser, Colt said, looking at the gash on my side. I nodded, barely hearing him. My mind was elsewhere. Stormwind, I said, a sudden spike of fear cutting through the fatigue. I haven't seen him. Colt, Claw, go find him. He's out there somewhere. The moment they left, the silence of the tent felt oppressive. And then I felt it, a presence that shouldn't be there. You can come out now, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Or I will find a less pleasant way to encourage you. A small figure shuffled out from the darkness beneath my cot. A child, no more than 8 days old. He said nothing, his eyes wide and vacant. He simply held out a sealed piece of parchment. I took it, broke the seal, and read the elegant script within. A cold understanding washed over me. I murmured, looking down at the silent boy. So, if I am correct, you are one of the little birds of Varys the spider. The boy gave a single, slow nod, his lips curling into a smile that was utterly devoid of warmth, a creepy, practiced gesture that didn't reach his empty eyes. Chapter 53. The Spider's Web. Alban Pav. 283 AC, 2 weeks after the Battle of the Trident, in King's Landing. The news from the Trident had fallen upon the Red Keep like a headsman's axe. Prince Rhaegar was dead. The royal army was shattered. And the name on everyone's lips was Julius Harlane, the Eagle Knight, the champion of the Trident, the man who had broken Barristan the Bold. To Alban and Alfie, it was not news. It was confirmation. Chaos was the new king in King's Landing. Queen Rhaella was a ghost of grief. But King Aerys, the king had plunged into a deeper, more terrifying madness. The defeat was not his failure, it was a grand conspiracy of traitors. Alban walked the halls of Maegor's Holdfast, the weight of his new duty heavy on his shoulders. After the Raven arrived, the king had raged. He blamed everyone, his counselors, the Dornish, and especially Tywin Lannister. He had burned the messengers who brought the tidings, a horrific spectacle that still haunted Alban's dreams. Then, in his paranoia, Aerys had turned on his own good daughter. He declared Princess Elia Martell and her children hostages against the treachery of Dorne. He gave Alban the duty of guarding them. Hostages. The word was a bitter taste in Alban's mouth. This woman had just lost her husband and her uncle. Now she was a prisoner, her children used as pawns. When he first took his post, her dark eyes had been full of fear and hostility. He had to quietly assure her he was no threat, a former loyalist to her husband. The hostility faded, replaced by a weary, watchful tension. Alban reached Alfie's post. From behind the door, he heard muffled voices and a faint, feminine giggle. He knocked sharply. Oi, Alfie. You in there? A moment of silence, then Alfie's slightly flustered voice. Is that you, Alban? Give me a moment. A few seconds later, the door cracked open and a woman, Princess Elia's handmaiden, Wyla, slipped out, her face flushed, smoothing down her dress as she hurried away without a word. Alban stepped inside and shut the door, his face grim. By the 7, Alfie. That was the princess's handmaiden. Are you trying to get us burned? The king needs no excuse. Alfie shrugged, a reckless glint in his eye. The king will have us burned with or without a reason. I'd rather have a good story to tell in the 7 hells. Don't be a fool, Alban snapped, his voice low. How did you even manage that? A smirk touched Alfie's lips. Wyla is agreeable. Now, what's so important it couldn't wait? Alban sighed, the anger draining away to be replaced by urgency. I gave you the duty to guard Princess Rhaenys, not seduce her caretaker. Where is the girl? In the gardens, Alfie said, his tone turning serious. Playing with that black cat of hers. Balerion the Black Dread. A shared, grim smile passed between them at the absurdity of it. Then Alfie's expression hardened. The Targaryens are finished, Alban. There's no one coming to save them. We need to get out of this city before it falls. I know, Alban replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. I've spoken with Lord Varys. He's agreed to help us, but there's a price. I have to do a task for him. I don't trust the eunuch, Alfie stated flatly. Neither do I, Alban admitted. But he's offering something I cannot refuse. Something for my family's legacy. Alfie leaned closer. What could be that valuable? What does he want you to do? Alban's eyes gleamed with a newfound, fierce ambition. He wants me to escort the babe, Aegon, to John Connington in exile. In return, he will give me the last surviving son of the female Blackfyre line. Alfie stared, confusion warring with disbelief. The Blackfyres are all dead. And what use is some exiled boy to us? What do you gain? Varys claims the boy's mother was Sarah Blackfyre, wife to Magister Illyrio of Pentos, Alban explained, his voice intense. And I believe him because Varys is one of them. My ancestor, Aegur Bittersteel, spent his life fighting to put a Blackfyre on the Iron Throne. That is my legacy. My plan is to go to Essos, join the Golden Company, and earn their trust. I will raise this boy to be a king worthy of the name Blackfyre. The throne was stolen from his bloodline. I will see it returned. And Esser Julius? Alfie asked, aghast. He fights for Robert Baratheon. Are you going to betray him? No, you idiot, Alban said, rolling his eyes. Listen, I killed Esser Danes and nearly killed Hoster Tully. If I stay, that truth could come out and ruin Julius. This is a new path. A greater plan. You won't understand, so just do as I say. Then what is my part in this, greater plan? Alfie asked, his arms crossed. You will take Princess Rhaenys, Alban commanded. Get her to Braavos, to my mother at the inn. She will know what to do. You can take the handmaiden and the damned cat, for all I care. Alfie nodded slowly, the weight of the conspiracy settling on him. And Princess Elia. Alban's face softened for a moment, then hardened with resolve. We cannot take her. It would be impossible. Her children are the threats to the new regime, not her. To save them, we must leave her behind. I will give you the final details tomorrow. Stay alert. Chapter 54, The Lion's Path. 283 AC. 1 week after the Battle of the Trident. Western Riverland. Esser Hale Fastrider crouched low in the brush, his eyes scanning the horizon. His mission was difficult and dangerous. Scout the border to the Westerlands and harass any Lannister forces. It was a task he was well suited for, but he was not alone. With him were 100 veteran scouts, men personally trained by Esser Brynden Tully himself. They knew these lands better than anyone. With their help, Hale had been systematically eliminating Lannister scouts. Dozens had been killed, and a handful captured. But it was not a perfect operation. Some had escaped back to the Westerlands. It was a fatal mistake, a great blunder. Those men would report on the defeat at the Trident, and they would report on Hale's presence. The Lannisters now knew they were being watched. It confirmed what Hale already suspected. The Lannisters were prepared and waiting for the right opportunity to strike. He was sharing a meager lunch with his men when the youngest of their group, a boy named Edmund, came rushing in, breathless. Sir Hale. Enemies spotted, they are coming. Hale stood calmly. Breathe, Edmund. Here, drink some water. Then report. The boy gratefully took the waterskin, drank deeply, and tried again. Sorry for the interruption, sirs. But the enemies are coming. At least 1,000 of them. And at their head, it's the mountain that rides. A wave of palpable fear went through the seasoned scouts. To face Gregor Clegane was a death sentence. One of the officers looked to Hale, his face grim. We are outnumbered 10 to 1. And the mountain. What are your orders, Esser Hale? Hale did not hesitate. Do not worry, good men. We have done our part. It is time to retreat and report this to our superiors. 283 AC. A month after the Battle of the Trident. HQ of the Rebel Alliance. Esser Julius Harlane Pav. We were having a less than wonderful time after the battle. The aftermath was the most gruesome work imaginable. Cleaning the dead, sorting the nobles from the small folk, sending bones back to families, and burying the rest. Tending to the wounded and compensating those who had lost limbs. Building a new prison for our thousands of captives and persuading some to join our cause. Many lords refused, but the peasant soldiers did not need to be asked twice. We recruited nearly 20,000 fresh levies. It took me and the other lords a great deal of time to reorganize. But with me overseeing the logistics, everything moved faster. It was only possible because Robert was absent. If he were in charge instead of Ned and John Arryn, all we would have is a non-stop victory party. Sigh. Robert Baratheon was still recovering from his wounds, thus he could not attend another important meeting. Or so he claimed. Myself, Eddard, and John Arryn knew it was just another excuse. We were all aware that Robert's wounds did not stop him from fucking whores every night. So, it fell to Lords Arryn, Stark, and Tully and their bannermen to handle all the work. The battle had devastated our army. We lost 10,000 men at the Trident, with another 5,000 gravely wounded. That left us with 25,000 effectives, plus the 20,000 former captives who joined us. 45,000 men in total. The 10,000 Vale cavalry that charged the Dornish spears were brutally mauled, only 4,500 survived. Lord Corbray himself had died. My presence had changed the flow of the battle, and the cost was high. Thankfully, I had convinced Lord Arryn to keep 3,000 in reserve beforehand. In this medieval world, cavalry was the trump card. I knew Tywin Lannister would make a dash for King's Landing now that Rhaegar was dead. I had sent my trusted subordinate, Hale, to delay him as much as possible. He had done his job effectively, buying us precious time to recover. Most lords in the rebel force believed Tywin would support the Targaryens. I couldn't blame them, he was the king's old friend in hand. But I knew better. Tywin Lannister was going to have his revenge for the humiliations Aerys had heaped upon him. But unlike Walder Frey, he was too prideful to shamelessly come over after our victory. He would do something that gave him a powerful bargaining chip. He would sack King's Landing. In the timeline I remembered, Eddard Stark was sent to stop him but was too slow, burdened by infantry. I devised a different plan. I organized only our cavalry. The distance from our position to the capital was shorter than from the Westerlands. With our mounted strength, I was confident we could intercept the Lannisters. Hale reported that the Lannisters were taking a different route, believing the Riverlands to be well guarded thanks to his harassment. I just wanted to prevent the sack of the city and the slaughter of its people. Our cavalry force was a mixed host of 11,500 mounted warriors, drawn from the levies of loyal houses. We had 500 horsemen from House Ricewell under Lord Mark, and another 500 knights from House Manderley led by Esser Wylis. They were joined by contingents from houses Mallister, Bracken, and Frey, which together added a few thousand more. The bulk of the force, however, was still made up of the seasoned knights of the Vale. I was to command this force. Why would these proud lords follow me? Because the High Lords, Tully, Stark, Arryn, and even Robert, had all agreed I was the best man for the job. I had refused, of course, suggesting others, but I knew it was true. This favoritism, however, bred nasty rumors. Some said I was a secret bastard of John Arryn, raised in secret. What the hell? I complained to the senior lords about the rumors. They all laughed. John Arryn even told me he didn't mind people thinking I was his relative. That old bastard. I'm sure if Lisa doesn't kill him, I might just poison him for this. I snapped out of my thoughts and focused on the council meeting. Lord Roose Bolton spoke in his quiet voice. The prisoners are becoming troublesome, my lords. Especially the highborns. They demand better treatment and comforts we cannot afford. I propose we only keep the important ones. It would be good for our supplies and free up the men guarding them. Was he suggesting we kill the others? For some reason, the room fell silent, listening to the young northern lord. He had a point, but execution was out of the question. It would destroy our reputation. Thankfully, Lord Arryn firmly declined the implied suggestion. We would not commit such a war crime. The meeting continued, dealing with the myriad problems of the camp. Finally, Lord Arryn stood. My lords and sirs, Tywin Lannister has made his move. Our brave scouts report he marches for King's Landing. It is time we made ours. He turned to me. Julius, are the preparations complete? I stood and bowed respectfully. Yes, my lord. The mounted troops are ready. The horses and supplies are in good condition. With your permission, we can ride out at first light. He looked satisfied. Good. His gaze swept the tent. Does anyone else have any questions? No one spoke. Then I take your silence as a no. This meeting is adjourned. As the lords filed out, I stayed behind. Lord Arryn noticed. Is there something else, my boy? Is he truly treating me as his son now? Damn you, old man. Yes, my lord, I began. As you know, Tywin Lannister marches for King's Landing. I am confident we can intercept him. But I would like to avoid a fight if possible. If we can solve this with words, bloodshed is unnecessary. Lord Arryn looked confused. You think you can persuade the lion to our cause? If he intended to join us, he would have done so long ago. No, my lord. I know he won't join for my words. But he might for yours. Just think, the Targaryens are finished. Supporting them now is not a profitable move for a man like him. His expression turned disappointed. But the Tyrells still have a massive army at Storm's End. And you don't know Tywin Lannister as I do. His son Jaime is in King's Landing. If he joins us, his son is as good as dead. He won't risk that. I had to make him see. I explained the possibility of a sack, of the city burning, of the atrocities that would follow. As I spoke, his face shifted from shock to horror. I do not know what goes on in your head, or why you believe this war is already won, he said finally. But if what you say is true, then we cannot let Tywin Lannister reach the capital. Yet fighting him is also a terrible option. He looked at me with pleading eyes. You have never failed me, Julius. What do you think is best? I suggest you and Lord Hoster ride with us, my lord. We will parley with Lord Lannister. We will negotiate him joining us, with the condition that his troops do not sack the city. If a fight breaks out and negotiations fail, I swear I will protect you with my last breath. The old man laughed, a sound of genuine warmth. I never doubted you, Julius. I know what you are capable of. But what can we offer Tywin Lannister that would make him switch sides and risk his son? Well, my lord, he ruled the city for 20 years. He likely still has men loyal to him inside who will open the gates. We need only negotiate that his troops take the city for us without sacking it. His pride remains intact, he gets his revenge, and he gains a place at the new king's table. All right, Jon Arryn said, resolve hardening his features. I will discuss this with Lord Hoster. We spoke a while longer, sharing a cup of wine. He began to speak of his young wife. I wish my lady wife could give me a son. I would not mind a daughter, but, if it is a son, I hope he grows to be as strong as you, Julius. His voice was heavy with a sorrow I understood. All right, he conceded with a smile. After finishing the wine, I took my leave. Tomorrow would be a long ride. Chapter 55, The Lion's Parley. Julius Harlane Pav. We caught them. After a week of hard riding down the King's Road with nearly 13,000 knights, we had finally intercepted the Lannister host on the plains of the Crownlands, on the lands of House Bywater. The capital was no longer a distant goal for them, we were the gatekeepers. We had arrived first and waited for 4 tense hours before their columns appeared on the horizon. Now, both armies stood facing each other, the air thick with unspoken threats. The Lannisters knew a fight was not in their best interest, and we hoped to avoid one as well. A negotiation was the only path that didn't lead to a river of blood, a river I was determined to prevent. From afar, I observed the Lannister host. They were a sea of crimson and gold, every man better equipped than our own mixed forces. Our intelligence had been wrong, they didn't have 10,000 men, but 12,000. Yet, we held the advantage of veterans who had just broken the royal army at the Trident. Tywin Lannister's men, for all their shiny armor, had not seen a real fight in years. He placed his champion, Gregor Clegane, at the front of his lines. The man was a giant in black steel, looking less like a knight and more like an unyielding iron golem. He was impressive, and the armor was thick, but I felt no fear. His plate would not stand against my sword. Then the man of the hour appeared. Lord Tywin Lannister himself rode forward with 7 of his men, the Mountain included. From our side, Lords Arryn, Tully, and a contingent of other high lords rode out to meet him. I took my place between Lord Arryn and Lord Hoster, a position that made me feel like the central figure in this dangerous dance. We met in the open field between the armies. Tywin Lannister was every bit the imposing figure his reputation promised. He was tall and severe, with cold, piercing green eyes flecked with gold. His face was framed by great golden whiskers, and he was clad in magnificent red armor with a heavy cloth of gold cape. His gaze swept over us, and when it landed on me, I felt its weight. It was a probing, calculating look, reminiscent of Olenna Tyrell's, but colder and more ruthless. I was grateful for my helmet. Finally, his focus settled on Jon Arryn. It has been a long time, Lord Lannister, Arryn began, his voice steady. Though I never dreamed our next meeting would be like this. Nor I, Lord Arryn, Tywin replied, his tone devoid of warmth. But all of this is the fruit of madness. Let us dispense with pleasantries and come to the point. I agree, said Arryn. But let us do so comfortably. Chairs were brought for the 3 principal lords. The rest of us stood guard behind them as the negotiations began. The negotiation with Tywin Lannister was going, surprisingly well. At first, the Lord of Castle Rock held his ground, presenting himself as a loyalist riding to defend the capital from the rebels. On the surface, it was a convincing performance. But I knew better. I was a man with knowledge of this world's shadows. Tywin Lannister was not riding to save the Targaryens, he was riding to slaughter them, to orchestrate a second reign of Castamere. Fortunately, I had warned Lord Arryn. Armed with that foresight, he and Lord Hoster Tully had skillfully maneuvered the Old Lion into pledging his forces to the rebellion. Then, Lord Tywin laid out his price. His daughter, Cersei, would be betrothed to the newly crowned king. His son, Jaime, would be released from his Kingsguard vows. A Lannister would hold a seat on the small council. He would be the one to take King's Landing, using a ruse to enter the city and secure it with minimal casualties for our combined forces. I had to agree with his final point. Efficiency in warfare was a mercy in its own right. The fastest end was often the cleanest. Lord Arryn, however, refused the first condition. Robert was betrothed to Lyanna Stark. Instead, he offered Stannis Baratheon or Edmure Tully as potential matches, adding that if Lyanna were no longer alive, the matter could be revisited. The second condition, releasing Jaime, was acceptable. The third, a council seat, was refused. Arryn did not want to concentrate too much power in Lannister hands. As for the plan to take the city, Arryn agreed, but with his own stipulations. The Lannister soldiers would not harm the innocent civilians. They would not harm the nobles in the Red Keep, specifically Princess Elia and her children, who were valuable hostages for negotiating with Dorne. To my surprise, Lord Tywin accepted all of Lord Arryn's terms. It was a win for both sides. Lord Arryn might not have been the most valiant warrior, but the old man was a damn good politician. 2 days later, King's Landing. Just as in the history I remembered, the gates of King's Landing swung open for Tywin Lannister. Our army stayed back, waiting until the signal came that the city was taken. To the guards on the walls, it must have looked as if the Lannisters were being chased by our rebel vanguard, seeking refuge. They had no idea that the true danger was the lion they were welcoming into their midst. The moment the Lannisters were inside, they turned on the city's garrison. The defense crumbled with shocking speed. As per our agreement, I led a contingent to ensure no one, rebel or Lannister, harmed the civilians in their homes. The Lannisters then pressed their assault on the Red Keep. We didn't have to wait long. The keep's defenders, those who hadn't already fled, surrendered quickly. Most of them, it turned out, were still Tywin Lannister's men. The depth of his lingering influence in the city was a stark lesson, and I saw Lord Arryn noting it carefully. The main gate to the throne room opened. There, to greet us, stood a Kingsguard. He was bloody, his white cloak spattered with gore, his sword still dripping. Sir Jaime Lannister first greeted his father, then Lords Arryn and Tully with a detached calm. I stayed behind Lord Arryn, watching the scene unfold with a grim sense of inevitability. The Lannisters had betrayed the Targaryens. The king was dead, murdered by his own sworn shield. The city was taken. But a single, urgent question cut through my thoughts. Where the hell are my students? Alban, Alfie, Morty. Did they complete their assignment? Chapter 56. A City Spared. Julius Harlane Pav. The Liberation of King's Landing. That was what this was, not the sack that haunted the history I knew. Because of our negotiations, there had been no widespread murder, no pillaging. The Lannister soldiers had only cut down the guards who refused to surrender at the gates. The city was taken with a startling, bloodless efficiency. Yet, I could still feel the fear radiating from the closed doors and shuttered windows. The people were terrified of what their new masters might do. I went to Lord Arryn and asked his permission to address the city, to assure them we were liberators, not conquerors come to rape and plunder. The wise old lord agreed. Thus, I stood before the wary crowds and announced they had nothing to fear. They could return to their lives, their homes and families were safe. The relief that washed over the faces in the crowd was palpable. In this small way, I had accomplished something truly good. I also showed my face to the public, to the small folk who had likely heard the songs and stories. I had become famous, for better or worse. In the Vale, I was the slayer of mountain clans and the gate breaker of Goldtown. In the Stormlands, the White Eagle of Summerhall. In the Riverlands, the savior of the Stony Sept and the champion of the Trident. Looking at the relieved crowds, I felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any battlefield glory. Because of the path I had chosen, these people were alive, their homes intact. I knew I was not a purely good man, but this act felt like a righteous one. My hands were stained with the blood of the men I had killed in battle, soldiers, knights, and outlaws. I carried the weight of knowing I could have acted sooner, that I might have saved Lyanna or Brandon Stark if I had been bolder from the start. Sometimes, when I saw the grief etched on Ned Stark's face, I felt a sharp pang of regret for my inaction. My thirst for glory and my place in this world had perhaps blinded me to a greater good. But the past was a country I could not return to. I had to move forward. In this rebellion, I had played a major role in battles, strategy, and logistics. Now, I often stood at Lord Arryn's side, a visible symbol of his strength and a source of counsel. He treated me with a trust and familiarity that felt like belonging. It was a far cry from the opportunistic sellsword he might have seen 2 years ago. The work of securing the city continued. We sorted through the captured nobles, mostly lords from the Crownlands. Princess Elia Martell was among them, a haunted figure. Her children, however, were gone. Lord Arryn informed me that a few knights had smuggled them out of the city days before, and not even Elia knew their destination. I had a strong suspicion who those knights were. I needed confirmation. I returned to the place I had stayed when I first came to this city, the Green Bird Inn. There, I found Morty celebrating with his new sellsword friends. I was furious to discover they had drunk all the wine I had stocked in the secret bunker I'd built years ago. But my anger faded when Morty reported his success. He and his men had kept a close watch on the Alchemists' Guild. He presented me with a complete list of every location where the pyromancers had hidden their vile wildfire caches. This was a monumental achievement. I promised him and his friends a handsome reward, and forgave them for the lost wine. Finally, Morty handed me a letter Alban had left behind. After reading it, I learned the truth. Alban and Alfie had taken the Targaryen children and fled to Essos. He wrote of his ambitions, his desire to follow the path of his ancestor, Aegar Bittersteel. I was surprised, but also proud he had found a purpose. If he can take control of the Golden Company, I thought, that could be useful one day. I wished him the best. But for now, I had more immediate concerns. I needed to inform Lord Arryn of the situation. And I needed to dispose of all the fucking wildfire before this city went up in green flames. As morning broke, I donned my armor and went directly to the small council chamber. The corridors of the Red Keep were now patrolled by a mixed guard of Arryn, Tully, and Lannister men. As I passed, they offered respectful nods, a silent acknowledgement of the reputation I had earned. My mind was clear, focused on the dire news I had to deliver. I reached the council chamber doors, which were guarded by 6 men, Lord Yohn Royce, Lord Jason Mallister, Esser Brynden Tully, Esser Kevin Lannister, Esser Tygett Lannister, and, looming over them all, Gregor Clegane. I exchanged a look and a respectful nod with Bronze Yohn. We had fought in the melee at Harrenhal, and while age and station kept us from friendship, a mutual respect for martial prowess remained. He turned and entered the chamber to announce my arrival. My gaze then met Esser Brynden Tully's. The Blackfish gave me a small, knowing smirk, which I returned. He understood the game we were all playing. Finally, I shared a quiet word with Lord Jason Mallister, a man I considered a friend since our time in the same tourney. He was enduring the tedious duty of standing guard with good humor, though the presence of the monstrous Clegane beside him was a palpable strain. I handed him my sword before entering, a gesture of trust. Lord Royce returned and gestured me inside. The scene within was a portrait of the new power structure. Lord Jon Arryn sat in the central chair, flanked by Lord Hoster Tully and Lord Tywin Lannister. They were discussing the besieging Tyrell army at Storm's End and the remaining Targaryen fleet at Dragonstone. Tywin Lannister listened in silence, his face an unreadable mask. Grand Maester Pycelle sat near him, nodding sagely. The old man's eyes widened slightly when he saw me enter. I didn't trust his feeble act for a moment. Ah, Julius. Lord Arryn's voice was warm. Come, lad, have a seat. I gave Lord Arryn and Lord Hoster a respectful salute, pointedly omitting Lord Lannister. The Lion Lord's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Thank you, my lord, but that is not necessary. I am fine standing, I replied. Then what brings you here? Lord Arryn asked. I bring disturbing news, my lords. The mood in the room shifted instantly. All expressions turned serious. Then let's hear it, Lord Hoster said, his voice gruff. I took a breath, ensuring I had their full attention. You remember my man, Morty? The one with the eye patch. Lord Arryn nodded. A cheerful sort. I believed he fell at the Stony Sept. No, my lord. I sent him into the city before the battle to watch the loyalists. He stayed behind and uncovered a plot, A final, vengeful act by the Mad King. I let the words hang in the air for a moment. He has discovered caches of wildfire, hidden in cellars and tunnels beneath the city's major thoroughfares, seps, and even this very castle. I laid out the details Morty had given me, watching the lords as I spoke. I saw their initial curiosity harden into alarm, then morph into pure, unvarnished horror. Lord Aaron's face went pale. Lord Hoster's knuckles were white as he gripped the table. Even Tywin Lannister's mask of cold control slipped, his eyes widening a fraction. They were no longer conquerors in a secured throne room. In an instant, they had become men sitting on a funeral pyre, and any single Targaryen loyalist with a torch could end them all. Chapter 57. The Price of Peace. A month had passed since the liberation of King's Landing. The city was still tense, but order was slowly being restored. I found a moment of rare peace in the Red Keep's library, the one place not overrun with petitioners, soldiers, or grieving nobles. The gardens were occupied by Princess Elia and her ladies, and I had no wish to intrude upon their sorrow. I was not entirely alone. Grand Maester Pycelle was also there, ostensibly writing letters for Lord Arryn, but I could feel his watchful gaze on my back. He had granted me free access to the library, an unexpected courtesy. I knew why. I had the backing of 4 Lord Paramounts, Stark, Arryn, Tully, and Baratheon. My influence was a new, unignorable fact of life in the capital. My repose was broken by the memory of what had transpired just a few days prior, the death of Gregor Clegane. Flashback. I had found the Mountain and his men in a street off the Street of Silk. They had not just visited a brothel, they had desecrated it. The bodies of several workers and the brothel's owner lay brutalized in the street. Now, the monster was turning his attention to the man's terrified family cowering inside their home. My own men and knights from the Vale and Riverlands stood with me, witnessing the atrocity. Clegane! I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. In the name of Lord Arryn and the peace of this city, stand down. He turned, his face a mask of brutish fury beneath his helm. He was a giant in dark, heavy plate, but his movements were slow, reliant on pure strength. Fuck you. And your whore. He roared, unsheathing his massive great sword with a grating shriek of steel. He lunged, a sweeping blow meant to cut me in half. It was telegraphed and clumsy. I didn't block, I sidestepped, the wind of the passing blade ruffling my cloak. As his swing carried him slightly off balance, I closed the distance. I didn't draw my sword. I launched myself inside his guard, my shoulder slamming into his chest plate with a sound like a ringing bell. The impact was immense, but his sheer mass kept him standing. We crashed together, rolling in the filth of the street. When we skidded to a halt, I was on top, straddling the much larger man. He bucked and roared, trying to throw me off, his gauntleted hands clawing at my arms. I reared back, my own gauntleted fists clenched together into a single hammer, and brought it down on his helmeted head with all my strength. Crunch. The first blow dented the steel. Crack. The second stunned him, his struggles weakening. Crunch. The third was sickeningly wet. I delivered a fourth, brain matter splattered against the inside of his visor and onto the cobblestones. It was the first time I had killed a man with my bare hands. Flashback end. To my surprise, there was no major political fallout. The evidence was clear, Clegane had been in the act of rape and murder. I had been keeping the peace. I received apologies from the Westerlands, not threats. Sir Garyon Lannister himself came to me, expressing regret for his bannerman's actions. It seemed Gregor Clegane was more feared than loved, even in his homeland. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. The meticulous, terrifying work of removing the wildfire had drained me, but it was done. The city was safe. And the people knew who to thank. Julius Harlane, the savior of King's Landing. The title had a good ring to it. I looked out the library window at the city below. The rebellion was in its final acts. All that remained was to break the siege at Storm's End, deal with the Targaryen fleet at Dragonstone, and find Lyanna Stark. With luck, it would end sooner than the history I knew. A raven had arrived stating Robert was recovered enough to travel but not to fight. Eddard Stark was managing the vanguard, and the full rebel host would arrive at the capital within the week. Feeding such an army would be a logistical nightmare, but one problem at a time. My mind drifted to the wildfire. We had successfully excavated thousands of jars from beneath the city without a single casualty. I had overseen it from a safe distance, letting my subordinates and hired workers take the risks while I took the credit, a commander's privilege. The substances were now loaded onto the few remaining ships of the Royal Navy, anchored far from the city. I mused on using them in a kamikaze-style attack against the Targaryen fleet at Dragonstone, a revolutionary and terrifying thought. But that was a gamble for another day. It was another coincidence that led me to Davos, the Suntobe Onion Knight. His negotiation skills were peerless, and he had already planned his daring run to break the Tyrell siege of Storm's End with a hold full of onions and salt fish. I provided him with what support I could and sent him on his way, hoping his legendary luck would hold. I also reconnected with Tobo Mott, the master armorer. He was shocked to see my rise in status but genuinely pleased. I hosted him for a feast in my quarters, my personally recruited maids preparing a splendid meal for my inner circle. The next day, Tobo came to me with a proposition. He returned the black steel dagger I had sold him years ago and asked for a significant investment to relocate and expand his smithy. He needed my influence to secure a better location. Seeing the value in having the finest smith in Westeros in my debt, I agreed. I provided the gold and dispatched one of Morty's more discreet sellswords to persuade the current owner of the desired property to vacate. It was a win-win. Even Lord Varys had proven useful. As a prisoner, he was eager to curry favor. With permission from Lords Arryn and Tully, I enlisted his little birds to help locate the wildfire caches hidden deep within the Red Keep itself. Making an ally of the spider, however temporary, seemed a prudent move. My thoughts were interrupted by a polite cough from Grand Maester Pycelle. Ah, Grand Maester, I said, turning from the window. Could you recommend an interesting book to read? His ears perked up, and he stood, offering a grandfatherly smile. Yes, of course, good Esser. Would you like me to read it to you? No, I can read for myself. If I could not, this is the last place I would wish to be. Oh, please forgive my assumption. But not many noblemen with your martial prowess take an interest in the pages of other men's glory. They tend to spend their time creating their own. That is true, I conceded. But my father was a merchant. Learning my letters was a necessity. Illiteracy was a vulnerability I could not afford. Oh, is that so? He must have been quite wealthy. May I ask where his holdings are located? So, you're gathering information for your master, I thought. Another time, Grand Maester. He was not a great man, but yes, he was wealthy. I let the finality in my tone end the inquiry. Mystery was a shield. He nodded understandingly and brought me a massive tome, a history of House Targaryen, emblazoned with a three-headed dragon. I took it and sat at a table, supposedly the same one Prince Rhaegar had used to pore over prophecies about the prince that was promised. Well, fuck him, I thought, and Melisandre too. The more I read of their prophecies, the more I believed the real savior would be some nobody who did what was needed without wanting a throne. Someone like me, perhaps. The thought was amusing. I opened the book to a section on Aegon IV, the Unworthy. I knew of him, a king whose deathbed legitimization of his bastards spawned the Blackfyre rebellions. He began his reign young and vigorous but ended it a corrupt, morbidly obese glutton. He was a man ruled by his lusts, who filled his court with flatterers and sycophants. As I read about his mistresses, his petty cruelties, and his mistreatment of his wife, I found myself disgusted. He seemed a darker reflection of Robert Baratheon. The detailed accounts of his misrule were a stark lesson in how a king could rot a realm from the inside out. I lost track of time, immersed in the sordid history. When I finally looked up, the Grand Maester was gone. Deciding I had enough of the past for one day, I stood to leave. As I exited the library, I nearly collided with a hooded figure. Well, Lord Varys, I said, recognizing the plump, perfumed eunuch instantly. What can I do for you? He offered a deep, obsequious bow. I am sorry to inform you again, Sir Julius. I am, no lord. Only Varys. Lord Varys, I repeated, maintaining a firm tone. I believe we need a more private place to talk. Let's go to the roof. A storm is coming. It's a good time to witness it. He gave me his signature, unreadable smile and another bow, gesturing for me to lead the way. Chapter 58. The Spider. Julius Harlane Pav. A storm was brewing over the narrow sea, a magnificent, terrifying sight. I watched it from my secluded spot on the Red Keep's outer wall, a place I'd found during my investigations. The masonry here was poor, the mortar worn and crumbling. A shoddy repair job from some forgotten era. The advantages of a modern perspective, I thought. I can't build a castle, but I can sure as hell tell when it's about to fall apart. I heard the soft, almost imperceptible footfall behind me. I didn't jump. I was getting used to it. Lord Varys. The spider glided forward, offering a slight bow. I am no lord, Sir Julius. I hold no land. I am but a humble servant to the realm. Power resides where men believe it resides, I quoted back at him. You trade in the most valuable currency of all, secrets. That makes you a lord in all but name. Varys acknowledged the point with another delicate bow. I would have thought a man of your newfound fame would be basking in the throne room. Your handling of the wildfire has made you quite the figure of interest. The wildfire, but not Clegane. Of course. He was probing, seeing how I'd react to the more controversial topic. I shrugged, my arms still tucked in my sleeves against the growing chill. There's a time to gather information, Lord Varys, and a time to reflect on it. When you are the topic of conversation, you need only learn the general opinion afterward. And you feel you will be the topic? He asked, a smirk playing on his lips. The knight who murdered Tywin Lannister's bannerman in broad daylight. I'd be disappointed if I wasn't. All actions have consequences. Tywin Lannister always pays his debts. I look forward to collecting. So it was a calculated stunt then. An act to gain notoriety. I gave him a thin smile. You might say that. I couldn't possibly comment. What I did was justice. Nothing more, nothing less. It was a lie, but I wanted him to think me more cunning than I was. An interesting response, Varys mused, his eyes glinting. But why? What drives a man to risk so much for the small folk? I am determined to be the best version of myself, I said, my voice steady. To do that, I must advance. I started with nothing but a sword and a handful of loyal men. I intend to turn that into something more. With that gain, I can do good. I can help prevent this kingdom from tearing itself apart. Ah, Varys said, moving to stand perilously close to the weak section of the wall. You served House Waynwood for opportunity. You befriended Robert Baratheon, saved Lord Tully, won battles, saved this city, all to build your own notoriety. The accuracy of his summary was terrifying. This man knew everything. Roughly speaking, yes, I admitted, my heart cold. I hope to make the realm stronger. Better able to face the threats to come. A simple goal. And you believe you are the one to do it. A strange bit of egotism, is it not? Oh, it is, I agreed, untucking my arms. But allow me a question in return, Lord Varys. I gestured back towards the keep with my left hand, a deliberate misdirection. How long has Grand Maester Pycelle been poisoning the king? Varys's genial mask shattered. His face became what it truly was. Cold, hard, and calculating. I mean, I continued, waving my hand, the Mad King was doomed the moment he crossed Tywin Lannister. Pycelle is Tywin's creature. It doesn't take a genius to connect those threads. Varys stared at me, reevaluating me completely. Since his return from Duskendale, he said flatly. A slow-acting poison. Even without a rebellion, he had 2 years at most. I pressed my advantage, needing to keep him off balance. And the Citadel. Are they purposefully aiding the rebellion? He gave a slow, deliberate nod. My suspicion was confirmed. The Maesters were players in this game. Tell me, my lord, I said, my voice dropping. Was Pycelle behind the deaths of Queen Rhaella's children? The issues with Princess Elia's health. She seems physically well, only heartbroken. Another nod. This man knew all of it and had done nothing. Because his goal wasn't stability, it was chaos. He was a Blackfire, and the realm's suffering was his ladder. I hated this game of whispered words and hidden knives. My strength was direct action. So I would play by my own rules. Thank you, Lord Varys. It has been a most fruitful conversation. My voice was dangerously calm. I am sorry for what I am about to do. I moved. My right arm, which had been holding the dagger from Tobo Mott up my sleeve, snapped forward. The blade, long and sharp, found its mark just below Varys's left ribcage, piercing his lung. He was quick, trying to push me away with surprising strength, but I was a veteran of 100 battles. I slammed him back against the weakened wall. The masonry, carefully compromised over the last few days, gave way with a grinding crunch. Varys, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal, disappeared over the edge into the churning sea below. I stood there. I had just assassinated one of the most dangerous men in Westeros. I cleaned my dagger on my cloak and then, with a grimace, dragged my arms hard against the rough, broken stone, tearing cloth and skin. The perfect alibi. Then I ran. I burst into the corridor, finding the first servant I could see, a young girl. For the love of the gods! I cried, letting genuine-sounding panic fill my voice. Please, help. Lord Varys has fallen. The wall collapsed. I tried to save him. I tried. The girl stared, wide-eyed. I felt a pang of guilt for using her, but it was necessary. This murder had been planned for weeks. Varys was the greatest threat to the realm's future that I could personally eliminate. Littlefinger was still a problem, the Lannisters a looming threat, but the spider's web was cut. I was playing the Game of Thrones now. And I was making my own rules. If you enjoy this story, you might also like my other FIC. Formula 1. Becoming the GOAT in F1. Knightsword Creators Thoughts. Chapter 59. The Princess's Perspective. Elia Martell Pav. Elia still remembered that day she stood on the balcony, waving goodbye to her husband. He had not waved back to her, nor to their daughter. It would not be the first time Rhaegar Targaryen had ignored them, but it would be the last. Now, months later, she was a prisoner in all but name, a guest of the rebels who had slain him. The world had turned upside down. Her husband was dead, her children were gone, smuggled away by knights she had mistakenly trusted, and she was left alone to ponder the ruins of her life. She traced the stone sill of her window in the Red Keep. This was her gilded cage. The treatment was far better than under the Mad King, but a cage nonetheless. She was the key to peace with Dorne, a bargaining chip for Lord Arryn. The thought was a bitter pill. Her mind drifted back, as it often did, to the cascade of disasters. Rhaegar's obsession with his prophecies, his humiliating crowning of the Stark girl at Harrenhal, the deaths of the Starks, and the war that followed. She had been made a hostage to ensure her brother sent Dornish spears to their doom. 10,000 of her countrymen, and her dear uncle Luwin, all ashes because of her husband's folly and her father-in-law's madness. She cursed Rhaegar for his blindness. She cursed Aerys for his cruelty. And she wept for the lives shattered in their wake. The two young knights, Alban and Alfie, had been her only comfort in those dark final days. They had been kind to her children. When Alban had come to her with a plan to smuggle Rhaenys and Aegon to safety, her heart had broken and soared at once. Letting them go was agony, but keeping them in the viper's nest of King's Landing was a greater fear. She had agreed, believing them to be her brother's agents. The truth, discovered later, was a deeper shock. They were subordinates of Sir Julius Harlane, the very man who had broken Barristan the Bold and was now a hero of the rebellion. Why? The question haunted her. What could he possibly gain? He served Robert Baratheon, the man who had crushed her husband's chest. Was it some twisted game? A longer, more subtle plot? Her only source, Lord Varys, was dead, and Julius had been the last one to see him. The coincidence was too stark to ignore. Now, she was left to unravel the mystery of the man himself. Sir Julius Harlane, the savior of King's Landing, the man who moved through the Red Keep with an easy authority that belied his common origins. He was polite, even kind in their passing conversations. He listened when she spoke of her children. But his red eyes were unreadable, hiding depths she could not fathom. She had to know. She could not rest with the fate of her children a question mark in the hands of an enigma. Summoning her courage, she had requested a private audience. He arrived at her solar as evening fell, dressed not in armor, but in simple, dark robes. He was a contradiction, a warrior who carried himself like a lord, a man of violence who spoke softly. Princess, he said, offering a respectful nod. You asked for me. Sir Julius, she began, her voice steady despite the frantic beating of her heart. Please, sit. He did, watching her with a calm, patient intensity that was unnerving. I find myself in your debt, she said, choosing her words with the care her mother had taught her. A debt I do not understand. My children are gone, taken by your men. Lord Varys, who helped them, is dead. And you show me kindness. I must ask you plainly, Sir Julius. Why? What is your purpose? He did not look away. My purpose, princess, was to see children removed from a castle that was about to become a battlefield. To see them given a chance at life, away from the swords and schemes of their elders. It is a noble sentiment, she conceded, her eyes searching his face for any hint of deception. But you are a man of the rebellion. Their lives are a threat to your new king. Why not let the chaos resolve the problem? A shadow of something hard and cold passed behind his eyes. I am a knight, Princess Elia. I have seen enough of chaos. I serve a cause, but I am not a butcher of children. Their parentage is not their crime. His words rang with a conviction that felt genuine. But it was not enough. Where are they? She whispered, the question torn from her. Are they safe? Did they live? He leaned forward, his voice low and earnest. I swear to you, on the old gods and the new, your children are safe. They are beyond the reach of the war. That is all I can tell you. It was not the whole truth, she knew. It was a sliver, carefully offered. But the oath felt real. The raw sincerity in his voice was something she had not heard from a man in a long, long time. Part of her wanted to rage, to demand every detail. But another part, the part that had seen the Mad King's pyromantic plots and felt the sting of Rhaegar's neglect, recognized a different kind of person. A dangerous one, certainly. A man with his own designs. But perhaps not a cruel one. She looked at him, this complex, confusing man who had upended her life, and found she had no more words. The mystery remained, but the sharp edge of her fear had been blunted, replaced by a weary, bewildered tension. Thank you, Sir Julius, she said finally, her voice soft with exhaustion. For that, at least. He stood and bowed again. Rest, princess. The worst is over. As he left, Elia Martell turned back to the window, looking out over the city he had saved. She was alone, a pawn in a game she no longer understood. But for the first time since her children had gone, a fragile, tentative hope flickered in her heart. He was hiding something, but perhaps it was not a monster he was hiding. Chapter 60. The King's Return. A pounding began right between Julius's eyes, pulling him from a deep, troubled sleep. For a disoriented moment, he thought it was the drum of war. Then he realized it was someone hammering on his chamber door. Gods, my head, he thought, carefully pushing himself up. The room spun slightly. The previous night was a blur. After another long day of navigating the viper pit of post-conquest politics, he'd bought a bottle of some viciously strong liquor from a castle steward. It had tasted like fire and regret, but it had done its job, dulling the edges of his fears and doubts for a few precious hours. Now, he was paying the price. The pounding continued, relentless. I'm coming, he growled, his voice rough. He swung his legs out of bed, wearing only a pair of breeches, and stumbled to the door. He yanked it open to find his subordinates, Colt, Hale, Morty, and Claw, standing at attention, all in their newly polished armor. They looked grim. By the seven, what is so important that you need to break my door down? Julius rasped, shielding his eyes from the torchlight in the corridor. Claw cleared his throat. Sir, they're here. Lord Baratheon, Lord Stark, and the main host. They're at the city gates. The news hit Julius like a physical blow, cutting through the fog of his hangover. What? The Raven said tomorrow. The information was false, or Lord Baratheon forced a march, Claw said, his expression tight. The castle is in an uproar. They're arriving now. Robert. Of course. He would love a grand, unexpected entrance. Julius ran a hand over his face, his mind racing. This changed everything. The careful balance of power he, Aron, and Tully had established was about to be thrown into the air. He noticed his men were fully armed and armored. I see you're all ready. Hale gave a sharp nod. We thought it best, Sir. It's a big day. Too big, Julius thought. He felt a pang of longing for his other trusted men. Alfie and Alban were across the sea, and Rick was in Bravos. He was spread thin. Sir, Colt ventured, looking pointedly at Julius's bare chest. Perhaps you should put some clothes on. The lords are gathering at the gate. Julius looked down at himself and sighed. Right. Give me 5 minutes. Don't let the kingdom fall apart without me. He closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. The hangover was still there, a dull throbbing in his skull, but it was now drowned out by the sharp, clear buzz of anxiety. The war was over. The game for the peace was beginning, and the most unpredictable player had just arrived at the board. Julius Harlane Pav. Flashback. 1 week after the death of Varys the Spider. The office of the Master of Laws was temporarily mine, and by all accounts, I was doing an excellent job. Keeping the peace in the city had become much smoother after Gregor Clegane's death. The brutal end of a Lannister bannerman had poured cold water on the ambitions of many would-be troublemakers. Lord Aron had given me a stern scolding for the reckless killing, while Lord Hoster Tully had backed me, arguing the beast had deserved it. I was grateful they didn't see me as just a murderous brute, likely because I'd taken pains to be more than that. A man who could make friends, tell jokes, and, most effectively, sing. To those around me, I was the heroic White Eagle Knight, not the stranger with a scythe. But both lords had warned me not to cross that line again. The underlying message, however, was clear: they had my back. And that knowledge made me feel a pang of guilt. These powerful men had shown me such trust, and I was repaying them by hiding the fact that my own former subordinates had stolen the Targaryen heirs, an act that could shatter their fragile peace. The thought of Alban and Alfie was a cold knot in my stomach. When Morty first gave me that letter, a part of me had clung to a strange, misplaced pride. My students, making their own path. It was a lie I told myself to soften the blow. Now, with a clear head, I saw the truth for what it was: a betrayal. They hadn't just left to seek their fortune. They had stolen the crown prince's children. They were the living proof of my treason. If Robert ever learned that I was the architect behind saving the dragon spawn he wanted eradicated, my head would be on a spike before I could utter a word in my defense. I had handed them the ultimate weapon to use against me. If Alban can take control of the Golden Company. The thought was no longer hopeful. It was a threat assessment. A friendly voice in the disputed lands was one thing. A man who knows you committed high treason, who now has his own army and his own rival claim to support, is another. He was no longer my subordinate, he was a loose end with the power to become a mortal enemy. The pride was gone, burned away by the chilling reality. They were not my men anymore. They were a liability. They were a threat. And I had to start preparing for the day they might decide to use what they know. Gods, I thought, the weight of it all settling on me. The timeline is gone to hell. I've lost my only advantage. I couldn't just go on a rampage. But maybe, with careful plans, I could still control the narrative. If the canon storyline was broken, I would break it in a way its mother wouldn't recognize it. Everyone had to die someday. If you can't eliminate your problems, they will eliminate you. My duties gave me ample opportunity to roam the city, listen to people's problems, and solve them. It was good, necessary work, but my mind was increasingly on the future. The war was nearly over. When the dust settled, there would be rewards. Castles and lands, taken from defeated loyalists, would be granted to the rebellion's heroes. Robert, John Arryn, and Hoster Tully had all but promised me as much. A lordship. The thought was no longer a distant dream but a tangible goal. The generous gift of gold from Lord Tully wasn't just currency, it was the seed for that future. It would pay for stonemasons, soldiers, and seed for new crops once a holdfast was mine. I was not only building a reputation but also the treasury for a house that didn't yet exist. My current focus, however, was on ending the war. I needed to strategize an attack on Dragonstone. I needed to end this conflict quickly so I could claim my future and settle into a position of unshakable power. I had a list of things to do once I had my own lands, the usual fare for a lord wanting to secure his legacy, crop rotation, breeding better cattle, building a port. The thought was centering. It was a goal beyond the next battle. But first, Dragonstone. The island wasn't far. By ship, it was roughly a 3 to 4 day journey. The difficulty wasn't the distance, it was the fact that the Targaryens had the strongest navy in Westeros guarding it. All we had in King's Landing were 36 ships, some laden with wildfire. Dragonstone was a heavily fortified island with few landing points, making a siege a logistical nightmare. But I had to end this. I needed to eliminate the remaining Targaryens on Dragonstone. I couldn't let Viserys and his soon-to-be-born sister escape. The thought of a future Daenerys Targaryen, mother of dragons, returning to Westeros was a nightmare scenario. Dragons were the nuclear weapons of this world, and their destructive power was something even I couldn't handle. I had to prevent that future at all costs. I would not let the dragons live again. The simplest solution was to send a message, to demand Queen Rhaella's surrender. But I knew, with a cold certainty, that was the one thing that would never happen. Chapter 61. A Lord's Lesson. Julius Harlane Pav. Flashback. King's Landing, 1 week after the death of Varys the Spider. Inside the hand of the king's office. A soft knock echoed in the quiet chamber. Enter. It's open, Lord Aaron's weary voice called from within. I stepped inside. My apologies for disturbing you at this hour, my lord. Seeing me, he put down his quill and sighed, massaging his temples. No need to apologize, lad. I needed a break from these ledgers. What is it this time? Having trouble with some bailman breaking your peace, Lord Master of Laws? He asked, a faint smile touching his lips. Nothing of that sort, my lord Hand, I replied. I have a proposal. I think it might not work, but it costs us little to try. He looked curious. And that is. Wait, before you tell me, I have a question for you first. Of course, my lord. Let me guess, he said, leaning back. You found another cache of wildfire hidden under a sept. No, my lord. Every last barrel of that accursed substance has been dealt with. I assure you. And I believe you, lad. No need to look so fierce. Lord Arryn offered a tired smile. Then my next guess is you've discovered another secret tunnel in the Red Keep. Not that either, my lord. No. Then unless you are here to stop my already weary heart, you may take your leave. He waved a hand dismissively, though his eyes twinkled. Stubborn old man, I thought, but kept my face neutral. It is not a matter of life and death, my lord. But what I'm about to suggest might surprise you. I said it with a calm I didn't entirely feel, and saw his eyes sharpen, his posture straightening as he prepared for some grand revelation. I simply wish for you to write a letter to Queen Rhaella, urging her to surrender. The elderly lord's face cycled through annoyance, surprise, and then settled into deep exasperation. I had to fight a smile. Distracting him from prying into my other activities by presenting a larger political problem felt like the right move. John Arryn narrowed his eyes. And why, by the seven, do you believe she would surrender her son's birthright? If she has any sense, she will fight to the last for her children. What other choice does she have, my lord? I countered. We have the support of 5 kingdoms. 6, if you count the Iron Islands distractions. She has none. And why are the Crownlands, the Reach, and Dorne not counted as her allies? The Crownlands are devastated, I explained. The lords stripped their lands bare. Nearly every able-bodied man joined the loyalist army and died at the Bells or the Trident. The women they left behind are starving. I've seen them flooding into the city, desperate for work. It's a tragedy today, and it will be a problem of 100,000 hungry mouths tomorrow. Enough, Lord Arryn said, holding up a hand. I do not need a lesson on the cost of war from you. I am living it. Of course, my lord. My point is, the Crownlands cannot support her. Dorne is no threat as long as we hold Princess Elia. And the Reach is in a similar state. They lost men at Ashford and Tumbleton, and the Ironborn raids hit them hard. Now they must look west and see Tywin Lannister's host and fleet poised to strike. Lords Hightower and Redwyn will be the first to demand they return to defend their own lands. It is still not enough. I would not believe a piece of paper brought by a raven in this situation. Why would she? She will recognize your seal and your handwriting. The gesture itself carries weight. It shows we are offering terms before we bring fire and steel to her doorstep. Then why bother? It seems a waste of time and parchment. Lord Arryn sighed, the weight of his office clear on his shoulders. Because it costs us nothing but a moment of your time, my lord, I insisted, sensing his patience thinning. That is not the point. A letter is not enough to sway a queen. You know how little a raven can carry. I understand, I replied. Do you? If you did, we would not be having this conversation. A messenger is better than a scrap of paper. He sighed again, a sound of profound weariness. I will send an official envoy after Robert arrives in King's Landing. I saw an opening and pressed on. I see no reason not to send a preliminary message now, my lord. We can send more than one raven. It shows resolve. All right. Fine. He said, a burst of frustration finally escaping. You are as stubborn as Robert. I sometimes forget that reviewing documents is all I do these days. What, specifically, do you want me to write? I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. Thank you, my lord. She has no true allies left. The Reach is fracturing under the threat of the Lannisters. We can point that out. Remind her that the men loyal to her in Dragonstone have families here in the Crownlands. The thought of what might befall their loved ones could sow dissent in her ranks and make her see the hopelessness of her position. Lord Arryn's eyes widened, and he stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Julius, by the gods. What has gotten into you? Using one lord against another, threatening families to turn them on their sworn queen. You sound like Tywin Lannister. Has this city corrupted you so quickly? I felt a cold jolt. I've gone too far. No, my lord. Forgive me, I stammered, backpedaling. I only meant, for the letter. To make the threat seem real. We would not actually do such a thing. It's a despicable tactic, I know. To my immense relief, he began to laugh, a dry, rasping sound. Ha! Relax, lad. I know you are not that kind of schemer. Ah, gods, I needed that laugh. Very well. I will see what I can draft. Now, go. Let an old man work. You enjoy your heart attack, you old fox, I thought, my pride slightly stung but my objective achieved. Yes, of course, my lord. Thank you. I bowed slightly and took my leave, the door closing softly behind me. To be continued.